Welcome to episode number 55 and another installment of Direct Connections. This is another two-part episode, and back on the show to talk Mopars is our friend Jonny Mopar, and this time he brought our mutual friend Mike Coffey. You guys should know Jonny by now since he's practically my part-time co-host, and if you don't know Mike, you may have seen him on TV, but he's the guy with the very well-known bagged white Dodge A100 van. He also has a big block Duster, and his most recent Mopar acquisition is now very well known because of its appearance in the December 2020 issue of Hot Rod magazine. The car is even on the cover of the magazine, and it is the perfectly patinaed 1970 Dodge Coronet RT in FJ5 sublime green with a 446 pack in the world-famous Hurst pistol grip shifter. The car is an A34 Super Track Pack car, and next to a Hemi, probably the coolest Coronet RT you could get in 1970, and even then, some folks even prefer the 446 pack, so to each their own. Regardless, the car is absolutely awesome and only one of 97 made. On this episode, we even talk about how this car could possibly be the only one of its kind in existence with this specific color combo and options. So this was a fun show. There were a few audio glitches because of some minor connection issues, but nothing too bad. The gloves did come off in this one too, folks. So please be advised that there is some colorful language in this episode that may be unsuitable for younger listeners or those sensitive to four-letter words. So please be advised of that. But most importantly, enjoy the show with myself, Jonny Mopar, and Mike Coffey. Now, without further ado, if you are a Mopar enthusiast, then you are in the right place. Don't go anywhere. You're tuned into the best Mopar enthusiast-driven podcast on planet Earth, and I'm your host, Chris Albrecht, better known as the Mopar Hunter, and this is Talking Mopars Direct Connections.
You're listening to Talking Mopars with the Mopar Hunter, your direct connection to all things Mopar.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Talking Mopars. We have another episode of Direct Connections here, and once again, I have Jonny Mopar returning along with our mutual friend, Mike Coffey. If you're not familiar with Mike Coffey, he's a guy that has had a lot of Mopars, and he does a lot of Mopar horse trading, and he recently got himself a very cool 1970 Coronet RT 446 pack car that you may recognize from the cover of the December issue of Hot Rod magazine. So he's got himself a featured car and hot rod. The thing is badass, and we're going to talk all about it. Mike, how's it going? Jonny, how's it going? Welcome to the show. Yeah, there it is.
What's up, Chris? Glad to be on the show. How are you doing, man?
Likewise.
I'm doing good. I'm excited to, obviously, Jonny, I've talked to you so much. It's just like you're a staple of the show now. So what I want to get into today is Mike. Mike, I've seen you on social media for a while. That's how we met. And you have a lot of cars and even a van that I think are bad. You still have the van, right? Because I want to talk about that too. All right. Cool.
Today, anyways.
Oh, yeah. It may be for sale, folks. Actually, everything is for sale if you have the money. So anybody that doesn't have deep pockets, don't even bother trying to buy any of Mike's cars from him. So
I don't know about that, but
yeah. Mike, why don't you go ahead and tell us and the audience who you are, how'd you get into Mopars, and what Mopars you've had? It's probably a big list.
You don't have to name them all.
You don't have to name them all.
Yeah, I don't think we could quite name all of them. Maybe highlight a couple of the better ones. Well, basically, like I said, my name is Mike. First car was a 74 Duster. I knew nothing about cars when I was 16 years old. I thought that, I knew I wanted some kind of an old car or hot rod, but I didn't really know what. I was looking at Novas, and a friend of mine, Robert Lightfeld, his dad, Butch Lightfeld, was an old racer in the area. And kind of through Robert said, "Oh, don't buy a Nova, get a Duster. Dusters are cool. It's kind of like a Nova." Again, I knew nothing about it. I flipped through the little dollar sheet and found a 74 Duster for $600 that a little old lady had here in town. And that was my first car. I, scrounged up $300 or $400. And I think I got a couple $100 from my parents. And it was a green on green 74 318 automatic Duster. So just nothing spectacular, but it was pretty much all downhill from there. So
So you started with A bodies.
Yeah, so back in those days, that would have been mid 90s or so, mid to early, probably earlier 90s. We went to all the local street races, me and all my friends. We all had, most of us had Mopars. And of course, I was always kind of the underdog. My friends had, a Challenger with a big block in it and a 70 Coronet with a big block in it. And I had a small block Duster. Another friend of mine in the area, Ted Evans, he kind of took me under his wing a little bit. They were Mopar racers that bought and sold cars and parts. And they had a yellow Volare that they called the Taxi. And, it had a little cab company sign on the roof. And Ted's brother, Ed, was, an old racer and always used to try to hustle me with the Volare and say, oh, yeah, we could race our 318s. And we ended up, I nicknamed him Lion Ed because come to find out the 318 that he kept calling it was a built 340. And later on, I actually bought that engine from them at a killer price because they just totally hooked me up and put the 340 in the car and actually had a pretty quick car. And then kind of just snowballed from then. And I got rid of that car, got a 70 340 4-speed Duster that was a pretty clean, mostly original car. Had that for a little bit, got kind of bored with it because it was like a numbers car and it just wasn't as fun.
You got bored with the numbers car. That's cool.
I know. Well, I mean, I've always been more geared towards the performance end of it and drag racing and street racing. I mean, that's probably what kept me in it more than anything.
Now you're from California, like Jonny, right?
Yeah, I'm probably about 45 minutes from Jonny.
Okay.
I'm in Hemet, which Hemet would back then were like Riverside County. It was pretty well known in this area for street racing. And, we had people from LA come out here and San Diego and, even on some of the newer street outlaws, they filmed out on one of our old streets.
Oh, wow.
So it's, it's been pretty well known out here for it. But, so I had, that 340 Duster. Then I had a 73 340 Duster that I was building strictly as like a street race car. I got partway done with it. And one of my friends had a 65 Coronet and I got the 65 Coronet from him, threw the 340 in it and then drove it around as a driver. I mean, I was a broke kid that, I worked in auto parts and it was just a car to get me back and forth to work. And, had the 340 and the 65 Coronet because it was an easy swap from the Poly 318 to the 340. Ended up, again, Ted Evans helped me to put a 440 in it, and we put a pretty healthy 440 in it, 509 cam, ported 906 heads, and it was probably a solid 12-second car that I put nitrous on. And,
was this the super stall car?
Yeah, that was the one. Yeah. Everybody knew it because it.
They knew it for its stall.
Again, being a broke kid, I didn't have the money to put a big converter in it. Yeah. And Ted goes, "Oh, you know what? I got this one." He goes, "I think it's fucked up, but we can put it in the car for now." And it, man, and thing stalled like probably 4,800 or something, and it was my everyday car. So I'm driving this, pretty healthy big block with 3-inch exhaust and 2 chambers, and it was kind of just kind of the grungy, street race car back in the day. We'd show up out at the street races like 6 deep in it and just piled in, and thing just sitting on the ground, and go out, make a couple passes, play around with people, and it never really did great. I mean, I think it probably on the bottle, it may have been a high 10-second car, which back then was, pretty respectable. This was probably 96 or so. So, and then I completely basically made a U-turn out of Mopars. One of my close friends at the time was super into mini trucks, and I was like, okay, I go to these mini truck runs and there's hot girls everywhere, and it's just a big party scene, and I'm like, I don't know, 18, 19. And I go to these car shows and it's like fat, overweight men that are all like telling the same, I guess kind of what we are now, but it was kind of like, it just there wasn't anything that exciting about it. And I got super into the mini trucks. I had a Nissan hardbody with 17s and airbagged, and that's kind of where I went with it. And then settled down, had a serious relationship, so all of a sudden the party scene wasn't really working all that good anymore. And I figured, you know what, I'm going to build another Duster. And that was 70 that was like a friend's girlfriend's grandma's car. And it was, again, a green on green 70 Duster.
It's always green on green. Something is always green on green when you talk to Mopar guys. They've had one Mopar that's green on green.
Yep, exactly. And first thing I did was pretty much gutted it out. I had a 400, it was a new old stock 400 short block that I bought for it. It was when Edelbrock heads had first come out, and I scrounged and bought some Edelbrock heads, put a 509 cam in it, and pretty much it started out, I just wanted to street race it. It was just, the goal was to have like a solid low 10-second car that I could just go beat on, and, and it pretty much turned to that, but then it snowballed and just turned more and more money. And then it hit a point where I mostly just raced it on the track after that, I'd take it out every once in a while. And then, my day job, I work for the water district, so I have to maintain my driver's license. And
sure,
I'm like, 7 to 10 years from being able to retire. So I'm like, okay, I probably shouldn't play around like that anymore. So over the last like 5 or so years, I've kind of gotten away from all that stuff. But that Duster, it ended up, before I ended up selling it, I mean, I had the car for probably 6 or 7 years, went through all different stages. That's probably the car that most people knew me for, like back on Moparts and all the forums. I was big block 70 Duster, and it was kind of before everybody was doing big blocks. And it was a fun car. It ended up with a 500-inch wedge. It made 850 to the tires on a pretty healthy nitro shot.
Jesus.
And right. It was pretty peppy. I mean, I think my last 8th mile times were like 620 range. So, I mean, it was a fun car, and it was still had a back seat. You could drive it anywhere. My kids loved riding in it. I'd take them to school, and then from there it just kind of snowballed. I mean, and of course along the way there was probably, I don't know, a couple hundred Mopars that I owned during that time period, but that was kind of the staple car that I always kept.
I wanted to ask you about that because Jonny, I believe, is the one who told me, oh yeah, he's had hundreds. And I'm like, hundreds? And were they all A bodies, or was it just any Mopar you could get your hands on?
It was pretty much anything. I mean, it started out with mainly Dusters. When I got that 70 Duster, I was given a 70 344 speed car that was just kind of a parts car. And looking back on it, I mean, this was probably late 90s. I totally should have saved it, but it was something where it was abandoned in front of a friend's shop. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to mess with that. I just parted it out. And with that car, pretty much that's round about the time when eBay started. So any spare parts I had, I think one of the key things, it had a rim blow wheel on it. And I remember looking on eBay and seeing, man, those things are like $600. And I put it on eBay and I got like $700 for it. It was like, holy crap. So I parted out the rest of the car. I used what I could for mine, parted out the rest, made good money, which I put back into the car. And then it kind of got me going, thinking, man, I could buy these cars that are in fields and sell the mirrors and the steering wheels and, all the parts and, make a few bucks. And that's pretty much what supported all my drag racing, was just, kind of buying old junky cars in the area. And then it hit a point where, I don't know, somewhere in the early 2000s, it seemed like everybody was doing that. Everybody was buying and flipping cars and, trying to part out cars. And it kind of hit a point where I kind of backed off of it, and I had a better job, so I didn't necessarily have to do that to support my hobby. But it was mostly darts, Dusters. I had a 71 Charger that I bought pretty early on that I bought it like an estate auction. It was really a clean car for like $600, which, as Johnny knows,
God.
I've never really been a fan of those cars. I mean, I know a lot of people just love them, but I'm like, yeah,
Sure.
the bad.
Is that the silver one?
No, that one was the 71 was a red one, and it was red on black 318. And then, somewhere later on, I had the silver one. That one was a 72, I think, 340 Rally.
Yeah, that was the car I remember.
Yeah, that was probably.
You took a long time to sell that car because I remember you having it posted forever, and I'm like, fuck, man, the price was, I felt, was pretty decent, but that's coming from a guy that likes third gen Chargers. So, I think the average guy.
The price was decent. What was it? $100, Johnny?
No, it was. I think you were asking. I think Mike was asking about $1,500 for it, if I remember.
I think I probably paid $600 or $700 for it, and it was like 1,700 or 1,800. It wasn't anything crazy. And I think that's one of the first cars that I remember Dave Freiberger reached out to me on. Because I remember getting the email from him, and I was like, man, and then when he saw it was me, he goes, man, you got all the good cars, because he was always randomly emailing me on all these cars that, I was digging out of fields and whatnot. But yeah, and then probably one of the bigger things for me was, so let's see, I had the Duster. I was building another 65 Coronet that I'd kind of pieced together, and I sold that to another local guy, and I was on Moparts, and I made actually he went on Moparts and he posted, oh, hey, I bought Mike's 65 Coronet. And this guy popped on there and said, oh, you want to buy another one? And he was local in the high desert, and I messaged him, and he goes, yeah, I got two of them. And I was like, oh shit, this is perfect. And he goes, $600 each. And they were pretty good cars. And I was like, man, this sounds pretty good. And I was like, well, what about in the background of one of the pictures, there's a 65 Belvedere. And I go, well, what's up with that one? And he goes, $600 if you want it. And I go, okay, well, in the background of that one, there's a 63 Plymouth wagon. And he goes, $500. And 16 cars later, at $600 a piece, I bought 3 71 Roadrunners, a 69 Roadrunner. There was a 67 Barracuda 273 4-barrel 4-speed. That car was super cool. God, I can't even remember them all. There was a 69 Coronet that had a munched quarter. There was another 69 Coronet shell. But I mean, all these cars were $600 each. And,
holy shit.
See, Chris, it's not just me.
Oh my God.
It's funny because you would think, oh, that was a long time ago, but it's almost like I still find deals like this. Not quite to that level, but it's pretty crazy. But
sure.
On that one, it turned out what it was the guy was a local Mopar drag racer. He had a super stock Challenger he raced, and a friend of his had passed away, and he was helping the widow to sell off all the cars. And when this guy had passed away, he had 47 cars. He had a wing car. He had a 70 Hemi Roadrunner. He had a 68 Hemi Charger. A lot of just badass cars, 71 383 CUDA convertible. And I pretty much, I got all the junk that was left over. But it was still, it was like, and this guy, I lived in like a track house with a 3-car garage and a little RV access. And I was having to sling these cars as fast as I could because I just didn't have room for them. And he was bringing them to me daily. Early on, the widow had somebody come to her house and stole stuff from her. So after that, it was like, well, if you want anything, you have to basically buy it off of pictures, and I'll deliver them to you. So it seemed kind of shady at first, but then once it started, it was like, holy crap. And they just kept, they had titles, they were all legit. There was a 70 Sport Fury GT. That was probably one of the more rare cars that was in there that I got out of that.
Oh shit.
600 or something. Of them. And then from there, it kind of snowballed into parts. Like one of the pictures, there was a stack of bumper jacks on the trunk of a car. And I'm like, so what's up with the bumper jacks? And he goes, $50 if you want them all. And there was like, I don't know, 3 or 4 Dodge Charger bumper jacks in there. And at the time, those were like $300 a piece on eBay. So
yeah, if you don't know anything about Charger bumper jacks, those things are like freaking gold for whatever reason.
So I don't know shit about them. So tell me, so they're only for Chargers?
Yeah, 68, 70 specific, really? And they have kind of like a cradle that's it's kind of like the early like 67, 68 Barracuda bumper jack. It looks kind of similar. It has like instead of using the hook, it just has like a welded on cradle. But they were, especially back then, you know, that was one of the parts that I knew if I got those, I could sell them. You know, it was good money. So, but
shit, I had no idea.
From there, I mean, it was bumper jacks, it was door panels, it was the trunk of every car would be full of parts, and these were all $600 a car. You know, there was a 62 Dart that I bought from him, the B-body Dart. And before he got there, he goes, "Man, I'm glad I opened the trunks. When I opened the trunk, it was full of shaker parts." And I was like, "Oh man, can you imagine?"
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a pretty neat experience. Wow. So that's kind of what really got me big in it. And then going to the Fall Fling and Spring Fling, which is a local Mopar show in Van Nuys, I'd go to those and sell parts. And yeah, it's just like Johnny said, more cars and more parts than you could even imagine. I mean, it's been a lot. It hit a point probably, I'm going to say probably about 10 or so years ago. I kind of started getting a little bit more back into it, and it's not really so much like a car flipping as it is. It's like, I guess it's just my hobby. I guess kind of like Johnny, where, you know, I tell myself, no more cars. I'm done. I got my circle set up. These are the cars that mean the most, and these cars can go. And then something else falls on my lap, and it's like, oh shit, back to the drawing board. You know, now what am I going to build? But my current cars that I have that I'm planning on keeping that I don't think are going to go anywhere are I have a 71 Duster that has a 496 in it. Kind of building a copy of what my old car was. It has a RMS front end on it. All the Mustang 2 stuff, coilovers, Willwood, strange brakes in the rear, Dana 60. I mean, it's pretty much a stockish looking street car that I'm hoping to get down to like 2,800 or so pounds, and just basically
got big Indy heads on it too. I mean, this thing is a gigantic beast sitting in the engine bay of this A body.
I mean, I'm kind of used to that look.
Johnny, I don't like how you said A body. I felt a little disdain.
I did know that Johnny might be stepping back into the A body market. So,
yeah, we could talk about that if you want. But
when you have so many fucking B bodies, that there's no more room for B bodies. You got to go down and get A bodies.
Dude, I literally was at our club meeting and said, this was on a Saturday, said, I am done with A bodies. And I've said it many times, but I'm done with A bodies. I'll never do another one. My Duster is the last one I'll own. And it was like 3 days later, my buddy is calling me up wanting to trade his Twister, a 71 Twister, for the D100 that Dennis has. So he was asking if I got the truck back from Dennis, because we've gone back and forth on it a couple of times, you know. And I was like, no, I hadn't. He still has it. He keeps kind of wavering back and forth whether he wants to keep it or get rid of it. And I haven't had the money to buy it back. And if I had it, I'm like, I don't know if I'd want to trade it for the Duster, you know. And then he threw out a price I couldn't refuse. So, yeah, right now the plan is to pick up this Twister.
Back in the A-body game.
Nice. What's the story on that thing? What kind of shape is it in? Yeah.
It's in pretty good shape. It was a vinyl car, so it's got some cancer in the roof. He actually, Okay, so he actually got that Duster from my buddy John Jones, the guy that I got General Mayhem from originally. So, and then he bought a 340 off of me. This is like 8 or 10 years ago. He had it gone through the machine shop and stroked to is it a 416 when they stroke the 340s or 418? I think it's a 416.
Yeah, sounds like a 416.
Yeah, 416. So he's got this built short block, some 340 parts, a 727, an 8 3/4. So, I don't know if you know the Twisters. They're kind of like, I call them kind of like the poser car because they have all the 340 stuff. It makes it look badass. Shark tooth grill, dual scoops on the hood, the strobes. This one's even got the gull wing in the back. But it's all, it's 318 and all the weak, drivetrain stuff. So, but he's got all the stuff to upgrade this thing. So, yeah, I can't turn it down. So,
all right. It'll be on the outside of the circle anyway, right?
I know a guy that's in the Dusters, so if that happens
this week.
I actually
I live vicariously through you guys. That's fine. That's fine. I'm cool with that.
I actually I warned Mike. I said, hey, think about all the Dusters you bought, because on the episode I want to ask you how many Dusters you've owned. I wasn't going to ask how many Mopars. It's like uncountable. How many Dusters? And I'll let Mike answer it.
It's got to be in the hundreds. I mean, I know I made a list years ago, and it was like, I want to say of just all the cars I had, and this was probably 10 years ago, I want to say there was like 500 or 600. So there's been a lot, definitely. I mean, and Dusters, I mean, I think
I see the blood draining from Chris's face right now.
I think I've pretty much had them all. I've had 70 through 76. I've had Dart Sports. I've had 340 cars, 360 cars, 4 speeds, automatics, 3 speeds, pretty much all of them. Yeah, there's been quite a few of them.
Let me ask you this, Mike. If you had to, let's put you in a hypothetical position here. If you could have one back, which one would it be? I mean, when you have that many, there's got to be one that was, like, oh god.
Does it have to be one of the Dusters or just any Mopar?
Let's go with the Duster, and then I'll let you play and pick up one of your Mopars.
I would say I could probably narrow it down to 3. I would say either the one that I had that had the big block in it with the nitrous that made 850 to the tires.
Yeah.
I sold it to a guy in in Australia. He was a drag racer out in Australia, race pro mod, and he called me on the car, and he's basically told me his story. He had brain cancer, didn't have a long time to live, and basically he goes, I just want the car because he goes, I know I'm not going to live long, and I just want to go do nasty burnouts. So he bought the car strictly just to go do burnouts in. And I've heard later on that he didn't make it till when the car got to him, which was kind of a bummer. And then I guess the car got tied up in some kind of a who gets it type of thing with his wife or ex-wife and current wife, or there was some kind of a sticky deal where it, who knows where the car went to. But that one, I mean, I regret it, other than the fact that I think when I sold it, I was kind of done with it. It was at that pivot point of it was too fast for what it was legal to do. And it was like, okay, do you cut the roll bar out or add to the roll bar or start redoing the car, or just start fresh? And at the time I thought, I'll just start fresh. And here I am 10 years later and I'm still not done. So, but that car was one of probably my first Duster, just because even though it was a 74, it was my first car. So,
yeah.
And then I'd say those have probably been the biggest two. Yeah,
That's how I remember Mike. So I've known Mike for probably 18 or 20 years, I'd say, but I've known of Mike for probably, I don't know, 25, 30 years, because I was buddies with Ed and Ted. So I'd always stop by. These guys would do bitch and fab work, and they always had Mopars all over their yard, you know. How I met them was I used to ride my motorcycle, my street bike, by their place all the time. And there's like this killer 70 drag car Challenger sitting in the I guess like the porch area of their double wide mobile home, you know. And then there was a shop in the back, and there was just like rows of Mopars. And I love burnt orange cars, and they had a 70 Roadrunner burnt orange with an air grabber. It was a 383 4-speed car, and I kept seeing the car, and I'm like, I always thought, well, having that many Mopars, he's going to want a lot of money for it. So one day I stop, and he's like, the car is still there, but he's like, I just sold it a week ago. And I was just like devastated, because it's like, shit, I should have stopped the first time I saw the car. How much did you sell it for? It was missing the motor, but it was like $1,500 back then. And then I've always stopped and BS'd with them, you know, throughout the years, but they'd always tell me about Mike. And when me and my buddy Eric were going to the street races in Hemet, because Hemet was like, it was hot for old school muscle cars, street racing out there. And I remember Mike showing up in the green Duster. It was like all his buddy, like, I don't know how many guys, I don't know how you got that many guys in your car. There must have been like 6 guys in that freaking little Duster.
It was good times.
Yeah. That was some damn good times. A lot of crazy
and
shit.
I think kind of the
then.
same. I
cool.
knew Johnny from, you know, kind of the same, hearing stories, you know, through Ted and Ed. And then I think the first time I met him was he had in the recycler some Coronet parts, and I bought a 68 Coronet trunk lid from him. I had a 68 Coronet that I was flipping. Yeah. And I remember going over to his place, and same thing, you know, track house, kind of little RV access. And he took me into the backyard, and it was just like, holy shit, I've never seen so many Chargers in my life. I was like, now I know where they're all at, you know, and I'm like, holy crap. Like, I don't even know that I'd even at that point in my life even seen more than 1 or 2 Chargers. And I remember it seemed like there was 20 of them back there, even though that's probably an exaggeration. But, yeah.
No, there was 20.
Well, and I remember talking to him and him saying, you know, well, when I was a teenager, and, you know, I, instead of buying, you know, stupid stuff teenagers do, I bought Chargers. And it was like, damn, you know, this dude was pretty freaking smart, because he had all these badass cars.
Yeah.
It wasn't smart. It was an addiction. I just loved those cars. I'd grab every one I could. But yeah, that backyard, I didn't have any grass. It was all dirt in the backyard. And I had cars all down that RV axis Mike's talking about, all the way around into the backyard, like all the way against the fence.
It was stacked.
Full. The yard was full.
See, this is why I like bringing guys like you on, because I hear these stories and I'm just like, fuck, I have no choice but to hear the stories and live vicariously, because I can't believe it must be something. It's got to be California, the desert or something. I don't know. It seems like a lot of people that I talk to that are from Southern California, they have stories like that. You know, somebody they know has 100 Chargers or something crazy. Yeah. You know,
well, I think this region is kind of unique because it's very dry, it's very deserty, and the cars just they don't rust. And then everything, it was sort of rural. I mean, it's more populated around here now, but shit, 20, 30 years ago, it was more rural. So when people bought cars and they drove them for 10, 15, 20 years, and then it stopped running, or they bought another car, they just parked them in their yard and they just sat there, you know. There's no code enforcement back then forcing people to go take them to the boneyard and stuff like that. So I think they just went into this hiatus for, 20, 30 years, and they were just there for the picking, They were everywhere.
Yeah, it's got to be a combination of that. And I mean, I would argue to say that you guys down there probably were the hotbed of street racing during that period of time. And I mean, just from all the stories I hear, I don't know if the way I see it or the way I imagine it in my head is, especially you guys are talking about early mid 90s when you guys are going down the street races.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was probably, was it all muscle cars? Because I know the import scene was it pretty much blew up in Southern California. So were they kind of mingling with you guys, or what? How did that work out?
I remember just seeing muscle cars, but I was probably ignoring
out here in Hemet. It was mostly muscle cars. You get like the Fox body Mustangs with superchargers and whatnot.
Okay.
When I got into the mini truck stuff in the mid to late 90s, that's when all the Honda import stuff was really catching on, and I did all that stuff in Ontario and San Diego, and it was stupid. I mean, it was entertaining, but going from watching 10-second muscle cars on the street to watching 14-second Hondas, there's no comparison. It was fun, and again, it was a different scene, but
sure,
yeah, definitely. The muscle car stuff was where it was at. But I'd say for sure, SoCal definitely. I mean, there was a lot of fast cars, and a lot of the guys that were into it back then they're still players in it. They're just everybody's moved on and everything's gotten a lot faster. So,
yeah, that's one thing that I don't know if. I suppose there had to have been a culture of the really, really fast cars before the street outlaws and all that, before it got televised. I imagine that because you see it now and you're like, okay, those really aren't street cars, at least when the show started. I'm looking at it like, okay, when I think of street race, I think I think a guy's driving to I'm sure I've seen it a couple times where guys trailer their cars, but street racing around here is nothing like it is in California. And I just see the types of cars that I see in those shows. I'm like, how many of those really existed before the show? You know what I mean? Did you guys see that a lot? Guys trailering their cars and cars that really weren't street cars getting raced?
Well, like what Mike was talking about, like guys from LA, like the big guys, they would come out, they would trailer their cars out, and those cars were no joke. They were stupid fast, but they were still, I would say they were still street cars. They were full body cars.
Back then we'd have, on a big night when there was a lot of people out, you might have 10, 15 trailer cars. And it was more so that they came from, different areas. But definitely for me, towards the end of when I started kind of getting out of it, which let's see, that would have been, I don't know, I guess probably early 2000s or so. It definitely, it was getting more and more radical, and you're starting to see like full blown race cars out there that were open header that were coming out, and and that was, and I've talked to some of like even the street outlaw guys, and even those guys will tell you that it's street raced. It's not that they're street cars, because everybody, those aren't street cars, and nobody's claiming that they are, they're on such a new level now that it's pretty insane. I talked to them up in SEMA, like probably 6 or 7, probably 6 years ago, and that's when those guys were first like dipping into like the fours, and it was I was talking to Sean Murdanova, and he was telling me, he goes, man, the difference in 5s and 4s is just night and day. And at the time I had a big tire duster that probably would have been like a mid to high 5-second car, and I'm thinking, holy shit, a 4-second quarter-mile street car, that's and now those guys are dipping into the high 3s. It's insane. They're just a whole level.
Yeah, that's absolutely insane. I'm sitting here dreaming of maybe someday I'll have an 11-second car or a 10-second car. Yeah, it's nuts. So Mike, what do you have in your stable now?
I have my 71 Duster. I have the 66 A100 that's bagged and channeled. And then I have the 70 Coronet RT 440 4-speed 6-pack, super track pack, FJ5 green. Yeah.
Dana.
That's the car that everybody wants to talk about right now, but I'm going to make them wait a little bit longer. So I first learned of you, Mike, because of the A100. I was like, who owns this A100? I saw it for sale. I think I posted it on the Mopar Hunter Facebook page or something. I saw it for sale and I was like, okay, I'd love to have that. I can't afford it, but I'd love to have that. And I just want to know the story behind that car. That van, did you decide, I'm going to go get an A100 and, slam it? Or how did that all come to
actually
come
a
to be?
Pretty good friend of mine, and he's in my truck club. His name's Troy Hamilton. He's up in Utah. He built it, a long time ago. I'm going to say it's probably been 8 to 10 years, maybe even longer.
Oh, really?
But when he was building it, I remember him showing pictures and whatnot. And I was like, man, if you ever get rid of that thing, I got to have it, because me being an ex-mini trucker and a Mopar guy, it was like the best of both worlds. And it's kind of a love-hate relationship with the thing, which is why you've seen it for sale. So anyways, he got it done with the slant six in it, drove it a little bit. He sold it, and I was bummed out, and I told him, man, I can't believe you didn't tell me. And he ended up buying it back probably, I don't know, a year or two later. Had it for a little while longer, didn't do anything with it. I want to say he pulled the six out. He had a Magnum 360 for it, and that's pretty much where it was. And he hit me up, and the price was right. And I drove up to Vegas, met him, because he's from Utah, picked it up in Vegas. And, I was just like, man, I can't believe I finally got this thing. I was so stoked. And then the 360, I didn't want to mess with the 360 Magnum. Mutual friend of mine and Johnny's, Dennis, I'm pretty sure it's out of the A100 or D100 that he has.
It is. It's out of the silver truck. You've seen pictures of the lowered silver truck when I used to have it, the D100, the 76. The Dennis pulled that 360 out to put a big block into it, and Mike bought I think it was some horse trading or something like that, right? You ended up with the 360.
That's the engine that's in the A100 now. And it's one of those things that it doesn't need a lot of work. I guess I'm always sidetracked with other stuff, and it's kind of like the stepchild of my cars that, like, there's always something that's more exciting to work on, and I'll go out and I'll start messing with it. And since I've had it, a friend of mine, Gavin, he's Slim's Fab is what he's most known for. He's a bike builder, does custom choppers and that kind of stuff. And I don't know if you remember on the one Roadkill where they did the Stubby Bob, the wheelie popping truck. They show the guy that has a Chevy van that's Mopar powered. That's Slim. They called it the Street Sweeper. It's a chopped van. He's had two of them. One had a 440, one had a 360, engine in the back with a V drive, and they're these crazy wheelie popping vans. But he did a bunch of work on it. He's a longtime friend of mine. Did a bunch of metal work on it. Basically, kind of finished it. And it's pretty much to the point now it just needs like some wiring, fuel lines, exhaust system. It's down to just the little stuff. But like I say, I'll go and I list it because I get bored with it. And just recently I had somebody hit me up that wants to buy it. And I'm like, man, I don't really want to sell it. I don't know. And I actually sold it at one point, and then I ended up buying it back. So it's like I say, love-hate relationship. But it's definitely different.
It's a cool van. God, that thing is cool. I'm kind of one of my best friends is a mini trucker, or was a mini trucker. So when I got introduced to airbags, I immediately thought, because I was never really, the low riders and stuff, I just wasn't really into it. I respected the builds and stuff, but it just wasn't my thing. And my buddy buys this little Mazda B22, and it's bagged, and he eventually body dropped it and did all the crazy shit to it. And I was just like, okay, that's insane. We started going to mini truck shows, and I was just seeing all this insane fab work. And I was just like, they were crazy. And it's funny because the mini truck scene was kind of like what I imagine the old school van, like the van craze was kind of like. It was kind of like the modern day version of that, where you go to those shows and it was just insane. girls, just the parties. It was pretty crazy. But that van, God, I remember when I saw that van, because I've always had a thing for vans, and I hadn't really seen one that slammed. I mean, it looks like it's beneath the surface of the earth. I'm just like, okay, this thing it's badass. I wish I could
it lays
buy
on the rockers. It's actually
cool.
set up to where you could put a pretty tall tire on it and still have it lay flat on the rockers. And aired up, it actually sits, I don't want to say stock, but probably close to stock.
How low can you get it where you can still functionally turn the wheel in the front and make turns and that thing?
Since I just fairly recently, I had 15-inch Steelies with dog dishes, and I put the Astro Supremes on it. The offset on them is a little bit different, so I think with those I would have to have it aired up pretty good. But I need to get the right offset wheel, and then you should be able to drive it. Probably 2 inches off the ground, roundabout, maybe 2 or 3.
Awesome.
But yeah, I think what I like about it, it's cool. It's one of those different vehicles that, you don't ever see. And then, like I say, the mini trucker and then the Mopar stuff. And then growing up as a kid, my dad always used to tell stories about his hot rod Dodge van that he had. And the few pictures of it that I had, it looks, kind of similar, except his was, roached out in the back and big wide mags and all that stuff. So I've kind of always been a van guy too. So.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you something that really pisses me off about your van. Now, don't take offense to this. So I'm a van guy too. And I'm trying to work a deal on this old Dodge van. And because I like my cars low, depending on what it is. Not like Johnny, he slams everything, but
I try.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, I want to see some pictures of some vans on bags or lowered Dodge vans. And every time I Google that shit, all I see is that A100. Okay. I swear to God, I'm like, is this the only fucking bagged van out there? I know it's not, but when you bagged Mopar van, bagged Dodge van, Dodge van lowered, it's Mike's van. It's plastered all over the internet. It's insane. So that's my beef with that van.
Because I think there's as far as Dodge goes, there's one other guy that's doing one right now that you put a small block Chevy in it, and it lays out pretty good. And then there was one that they did on Wheeler Dealers that my friend Dallas actually did the majority of the fab work.
I like that one.
And that one's pretty cool. I think it's actually for sale right now on eBay, but they want
it is. I forget how much it was, but I remember I was like, I think I should have bought it for when it was 30.
And it's kind of the typical TV car, it's not really perfect.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, so speaking of TV shows, and I don't know what you can talk about, but how many TV shows have you been on?
I mean, all in all, I was in the background on a Storage Wars a long time ago, and that was just kind of a freak thing.
That's where I know
I'll buy that. Mopar parts in there. I'll buy the whole thing.
Hoarder in me. Not only do I do Mopars, but anything automotive, collectible, old signs. I'm into all that kind of stuff. So I've always, and I grew up, my mom was an antique dealer, and, I grew up on her hip going to yard sales and searching for treasure, so I think that's kind of where the, I don't know, kind of Mopar picker in me comes out. But, so I was in the background on one of those shows. I did Car Warriors, myself and some friends, we did a build. It was like a 48-hour build off on speed. And we did a 72 Nova. Yeah, that was one.
Jimmy Shine, right? That
was
like Jimmy Shine show. Yeah.
On the channel speed or on the drug speed?
I drank enough. I drank enough 5-hour energies on that drink or on that show that seriously, like, I might as well have done some speed. But it was crazy. But I mean, it was a pretty legit deal. We went into the shop, and in 48 hours there was 2 teams, and we both built LS3 swapped 72 Novas, full paint, full interior. I mean, it was a pretty neat experience.
That was the show where you each had the same car, right? Isn't that what the premise of the show was? Okay, yeah. See, there's so many car shows, I lose track of them all, but that one sounded familiar. I'll have to see if I can find that. Cool. So what other star power do you got?
It's all pretty small stuff. But I did last year on Discovery. They had last year or year before, they had one that was called Sticker Shock. That was basically you
I remember that show
on there, and they tell you what it's worth. And I was actually on the first episode, the very first car. I brought a 70 Charger RT that was somewhat of a survivor car.
I remember that car. Yeah.
But
shit.
Now
that I think about it, yeah, because my wife and I, we were watching the show and we were trying to guess what it was going to be worth. Of course, I won. So if she ever listens to this,
and that was so funny because that was a perfect example of everybody told, after that show aired, and they asked me on the show, what do you think it's value wise? And I had a pretty good idea, even though of course I kind of played like, oh yeah, I think that's all it's worth. But it pretty much sold for right on with what the show said it would and with what I said it would. And everybody was going, oh, it doesn't run. It has rust in the roof. It was like, it's a Y3 cream, which is like one of the rarest colors in a 70 Charger RT in an original car. The only thing that had been swapped, somebody put a 4-speed in it and it was an automatic. And who's going to bitch about a 4-speed? So, I mean, it was a pretty cool car. But...
yeah, I remember looking at my wife and going, you probably are seeing a piece of shit, but I would drive the shit out of that car.
Yeah, that car had nice patina. That was the kind of car you throw some wheels and tires on it, get it running, maybe a vinyl top, and just leave it alone.
How long ago was that?
God, maybe 2-3 years ago.
A few years ago?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, because I remember the car. As soon as you said that show, I was like, in my head while you're talking, I was like, oh, it was the Charger. I guarantee it was the Charger.
And that's awesome. Your question before, what car would I probably get back? I'm going to say that's probably one of the, again, top couple non-A body cars that if I could have back.
Yeah.
It's funny because I really wasn't a fan of, and Johnny knows this, of 70 Chargers. And I actually sold that kind of with the intent of looking for a 68 Charger, which I ended up buying from Johnny. So it was kind of funny the way it worked out. Like,
Yeah,
he actually
I sold one. Believe it or not, I sold one.
He probably got 5 times what he paid for it too.
I saw it sitting on the outer circle at his place, and I knew it was my time to get it.
He saw the ring. He saw the ring just barely move in, and he just struck.
Was right, and that one I actually. I put some parts with it when I sold it, and I made a few bucks on that one, and it actually worked out really cool. Believe it or not, I want to say 16, 17 years old, bought the car.
Oh,
and within a year and a half of buying the car, the thing is beautiful, fully restored, and this was a full blown basket case.
Really,
I mean, it was pretty much a mess, and this kid built a beautiful car out of it. I mean, he earned the money himself and did most of the work himself, and of course with help of his dad. But
Mike tortures me with the videos of this car he sends over. It's like, why can't I get a car done in a year and a half?
Because you have 30 of them, and you're trying to juggle them.
It tortures me every time he sends me a picture. I'm like, man, that thing looks amazing, but. Which actually my reasoning for selling that one was to buy the white on white 68 Charger that I sold to get the 70 RT. So, I mean, there's kind of always a method to the mayhem. It's just juggling.
Yeah. I love that Charger too. God, white on white. Oof. 68 too. That's I like 68s. There's something about a 68 Charger that perfect. But that was a perfect segue, Mike. Let's talk about the Coronet. Let's talk about the 6-pack in the room. So Randy from Archaeology.
I actually met Randy when I was on Sticker Shock. Randy was one of the appraisers on the show.
Okay. Okay, that's where it's all making sense to me now. It's all coming together. Okay, yeah.
Basically on the show, I met a few people. I went on the show. A friend of mine was one of the producers for the show, and he's like, "Man, you got to bring something on here because you always find cool shit. You always come up with all these cars and whatnot." And I had just bought the Charger. I sent him a picture, and he said, "Yeah, let's do it." So I met Randy on the show. Didn't really know him, just followed him on Instagram and Facebook. Back and forth. We'd talked here and there, because he buys estates. And like I say, being that I'm kind of a junk hoarder, likewise, with, just buying random shit, old shit. There was a few times that I reached out to him. He's doing an estate out in Anza, which is like a little hole in the wall city out in the middle of nowhere from here, where it's like meth labs and old people and properties. It's really a weird place. Anyways, he's got an estate out there that he's handling, and I bought a 73 6-cylinder 3-speed on the floor duster from him just a couple weeks ago. But out on that estate, there was a few things I was interested in, and I'd messaged him back and forth on that stuff. And he kind of out of the blue messaged me and said, "Well, wait till you see what I'm, this next estate I have." And he sent me, the first picture he sent me was the 70 Coronet RT. And I was just floored. I was like, holy shit, where did he find this thing? The next picture was the 69 Charger 500 in the garage. And then the next picture was the under the hood of the 71 Hemi Challenger. That's the one that Troy Mopar's 5150 bought. And it was just like mind blowing, instantly I was like, holy crap, where did you find these? And then, and there was a 69 Charger RT in the background. And then he sent me pictures, of course, of the Shelby Mustang that was part of it as well. 68 Shelby Mustang.
Yeah.
So I pretty much, I told him, hey, I know you're an expert in what you do, but I know Mopars well. And if you want a hand with any of it, I'd be happy to, crawl under them and get numbers for you and check numbers and match numbers and, just kind of tell you what goes with what cars, if there's any question or, what's correct for what car. And he was pretty much, on board with, that sounds good. Any help, and he kind of said the same thing that, I know a little bit about everything, but I'm not a Mopar expert by any means. And, so
yeah. So you slithered on in.
It was kind of, and right off the bat, my wife was telling me, don't even get excited about these cars. You know damn well you're not going to have a chance in hell at touching any of them. And I mean, because she knows, instantly, like there's this thing where I'm like, I'm like,
he's going to touch
I can't believe somebody else found him and I didn't, so I don't know, a couple weeks went by and and likewise, I told him I'd be interested in purchasing any parts, and he pretty much told me the story. Mark, the owner that had these cars, he passed away, I believe, back in March. He basically bought these cars back in the 70s, held on to them. The Coronet, I have the receipt from when he bought it in Tucson in 1974 for $975. And I want to say the Hemi Challenger, I think he bought in, I believe it was 72 or 73 in Lancaster. The Charger was supposed to be like a parts car. And then the Charger 500, I want to say, I think he bought like in the early 80s for like $500 or $600. So he had all these cars, just from the get-go, and he had a bunch of random parts, and he was military. He hauled all the stuff with him when he moved from place to place, but ultimately he was, went back to Tucson where he had lived. And I think a big thing for the cars, they sat because they all had to be smogged. In Arizona, they had to be smogged. So I think that was right.
That's insane.
So I think that was a big part of why they sat, because, he would have had to smog each one, and then of course there's people go, oh man, I can't believe you let all these cars go to hell. And it's just like, it's like myself or Johnny,
of course.
if you have 3 cars, try and maintain this guy actually altogether, I think he had 7 or 8 cars. So try and maintain 7 or 8 cars. Obviously, you don't have room to put all of them in the garage.
Yeah.
He had a business. He used his shop space for his business, and the car sat outside. But so they're weathered from being in Arizona heat. But all in all, I mean, the condition of them is just amazing. The Coronet. It's, the paint's cooked off of it, but it's going to get a little bit of touch up. It's actually right now, a friend of mine, Dave Martinez, he's fixing a little bit of rust around the back window, which was the only rust in the whole car, putting a new headliner on it, putting a vinyl top in it. And then, pretty much from there, we're going to touch in a little bit of the green and kind of buff it out to keep it looking, blend the sides so it'll look original, but not be rusty, where if I leave it outside, it's gonna
sure
stuff.
Yeah. But I've never seen a patinaed Bumblebee stripe before. It's the coolest. I want a picture of that. It just looks so damn cool. I saw that and I was like, you've got to be shitting me. That is the coolest stripe I've ever seen, because I've never seen, I'm sure they're out there and I just haven't paid close enough attention, but the car's the right color. It checks all the boxes if you're into ratty Mopars. And I love that car. When I heard that you got it, I was like, of course he did.
Well,
this guy. But yeah, I was happy because I was like, well, at least I know the guy and I can at least get, an inside look and see all these pictures of it. So very cool. So you get there. I got to break this down because most Mopar guys, a lot that listen to this show, are sitting there. That's like their dream to find one of those cars. And you go out there and you have your eyes set on this.
Believe it or not. So I actually,
all right, here we go.
At first I really, really, really had my heart set on the 500. I was just, to me, the kind of the racing history of a 500 and everything else, I was like, and then it's in such good condition because that was the car that was in the garage. And I was like, man, I would take this thing, put some 17-inch black steel wheels on it, maybe those low profile red line tires, chrome lug nuts, slam the thing, put a big nasty motor in it. And I mean, it would just be amazing because that one, I think of all of them, was the only one that wasn't numbers matching, was the 500. So anyways, the way it ended up working out was a couple weeks went by after Randy shared the pictures and he said, well, I'll let you know. He went out there, took a bunch of pictures, kind of gave me a rundown of what it was. And basically he said, hey, I'm going to bring back a truckload of stuff. You can make an offer on it and we'll see if everything works between us and go from there. So I bought a bunch of parts from him. And he said, okay, well, we'll see how the rest of it goes. He went out a couple weeks later, ended up bringing all 5 cars back with him on, a car transporter. And he called me up and said, hey, man, the cars are going to be out of my house. If you want to come help unload and check them out. And, at this point, I still didn't think I had any shot in the dark of buying any of the cars. But I wanted to try anyways. And not only that, I wanted just the opportunity to be a part of it was so cool because, how do you ever come across something like that? I got to sit in a 71 Hemi Challenger that's unrestored, like that was so cool.
Thanks for joining us on the show today. Part 2 will be out within the next week or so be on the lookout for that. It's always a great time talking Mopars with my friends, and this is just one of many, many, many more to come. This episode was actually supposed to be the first live stream Direct Connections episode, but due to technical difficulties on my end, we couldn't make it happen. Hopefully, we'll be able to start live streaming soon. I'm exploring new, more reliable options to make that happen because I was really looking forward to interacting with the audience during the show, but unfortunately, it didn't work out this time. Stay tuned. We're going to be going live soon, I promise. Special thanks to my friends over at hemipages.com and DIYhemi.com. They both have some really cool stuff happening right now and are making waves in the world of Mopar, so be sure to check those guys out and show them some love. There you have it, my friends. Another episode of Talking Mopars is in the books. For more information about this podcast or to listen and subscribe to the show, please visit TalkingMopars.com, and don't forget that you can send me your Mopar stories, questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, and everything else on your Mopar-addicted mind to Chris@TalkingMopars.com, or leave me a voice message on my voicemail box at 209-28-MOPAR to hear yourself on the show. Before we go, I want to tell you guys about a great way to help support this podcast, and that's by picking up some merch in the Talking Mopars merch shop. Not only can you get some cool Talking Mopars swag, but you're also helping me keep this show on the road. So if you'd like to help support the show, jump on over to TalkingMopars.com, and in the menu, click on Talking Mopars merch, and that will take you right to the shop. That's it, my friends. Until we talk again, I am your host, Chris Albrecht, and that was Talking Mopars, Direct Connections.
Thank you for listening to Talking Mopars, your direct connection to all things Mopar. Until next time, remember, no Mopar left behind.